the previous videos, we have mentioned about you can search various types of information from the internet, such as from the Web of Science, Google, and Google Citations. And you will have to adopt those informations wisely. This brings to the importance of distinguishing the type of publications, knowing their characteristics, so that you can use them wisely and appropriately. You have been introduced with two major types of publications, which are the scholarly and general publications. The scholarly publications are normally more research-oriented, as for the general publications are meant for general readings and basic understandings. Both are worth searching and referring, and you will have to adopt whichever is appropriate and necessary in your research study. Now you need to be able to distinguish between two major types of sources, namely the primary and secondary sources. Due to their unique characteristics, their usage and applications may vary slightly, and you will need to use them appropriately in the research. First, let us look at the primary sources. It is referring to the raw information and the first-hand evidence done by an individual parties or institutions. This kind of the information give direct access to the subject, and it needs to be analyzed in order to acquire findings and conclusions. This kind of information are more credible as evidence. In another word, the primary sources are referring to the raw data and result obtained from certain study, which is considered the first-hand information acquired by some parties and institutions. Subjected to the needs of your research, this kind of information can serve as the data for you to do the analysis, which leads to your intended findings and conclusions. These are a few examples for the primary sources, which include the interview transcripts, diaries, data in the form of statistical, quantitative, qualitative, survey, polls, and others. These also include the letters, documents, and photos, which is acquired firsthand, as well as some empirical studies, also as in terms of the raw informations. The purpose of this kind of sources is to make new discoveries, to provide credible evidence for the argument, and also give authoritative information about the topic. You will see this kind of sources normally constitute mainly on the facts and figures without incorporating the opinions or the findings of the respective parties. You will have to dig into the data, looking for the correlations. You might not going to use all the information done by the relevant parties, or it might to some extent the way the information being gathered is not in line with your directions, as those data or information acquired by the respective parties are from the start meant for their own purposes. The situation now, it will be as if you are borrowing their raw data for your own research study and findings. The second type of the sources, it will be the secondary sources. It is basically the second-hand information and commentary from the other researchers. Here you will see that on top of the raw information and results, there will be inputs by the researchers in terms of their opinions, arguments, findings, and even the conclusions. This kind of sources will constitute the describing, interpreting, synthesizing of the primary sources. And the primary sources are normally used as the background informations, and then somehow their raw data and results are normally elevated to the next level in terms of the principles and findings as a part of the inputs given by the researchers. These are the examples of the secondary sources, where most of the journals articles and the review articles are in the category of the secondary sources. Other than that, the academic books, encyclopedias, newspapers, magazine articles, biographies are also considered as the secondary sources. The purpose of these secondary sources is to gain background information of a certain topic, to support or contrast arguments with another researcher's ideas, and sometimes you will need them to gather information from the primary sources that cannot be accessed directly. In a more simpler term, we can distinguish the primary sources and the secondary sources by asking ourselves whether the piece of information given are purely the first-hand informations or data, and whether it constitutes the inputs and the findings of the respective researchers. If it involves the inputs from the researchers, normally they will be considered as the secondary sources. It will be depending on the nature of your research, what kind of the sources of information you will require. Some might require the primary sources, while the other might require for the secondary sources. You will have to use them appropriately in your research. Just now we mentioned a term of opinions, or the inputs given by the researchers. Maybe we spend a little time to handle the differences between the facts and the opinions. In fact, if you refer to most of the publications, the facts and opinions are normally being mixed up within a piece of paper. A typical research article will first present the facts, and later in their discussions, they will perform their own analysis and interpretations and state their opinions in the forms of findings. Therefore, it is important for you to be able to distinguish between the facts and opinions, as the ground level of these two things is different. I would say that the facts is referring to some evidence which has been proven and with a very solid ground. It gives the information in terms of the truth and the reality, but not the theory or speculations. On the other hand, the opinions will be more related to the belief and the theories proposed by the respective researchers, which by fundamental, not everyone will agree with that. The standing ground for the opinions are not as solid as the facts. Knowing the difference between the opinions and facts, it doesn't mean that the opinions given by the relevant researchers is not worth referring. This will have to go back to the fundamentals of the publication system in the academic communities, where the papers being published, the authors are normally the researchers and also the experts within the fields. They should have better understanding regarding to the subject matters, and the research itself is carried out in a more regular manner as compared to the general public. Also, whichever statement being made in the publications will have to be carefully constructed. The usage of the terminology has to be quite rigorously selected so that it provides the meaning as accurate as possible. And whichever opinions given by the respective researchers will have to on basis of the facts and figures. With that, their opinions and the inputs is also valuable to us, especially when we would like to venture into the subjects which is yet to be fully known within the field of the study. Therefore, it is worth for us to look into the opinions given by the respective researchers, but we will have to always cross-check the basis of the facts that they have based on, and you should have your own critical thinkings and opinions on basis of the same facts and figures to decide whether you agree or disagree with their opinions. The idea here is your thinkings should not be fully guided or manipulated by the opinions given by the researchers. You should have your own independent opinions, which is on basis of the actual facts and figures, which at the end of the day, you might be agree or disagree with the opinions. Their opinions might not always 100% right, and you don't have to always agree with their opinions. These are a few examples for you to distinguish the opinions and the facts. It not only helps you to distinguish those from the research articles, it is also helpful for you to construct your writing when you are expressing opinions or expressing the facts. These are the examples for the opinions. When you're talking about something which is you feel the best, or when you're expressing your preferences, or you're giving remarks on something which is rather personal, then this can be considered as an opinion. And when a fact is being expressed, normally the information disclosed is undeniable, which is rather objective and nearly agreed by everybody, as it is being proven throughout the history.